One rainy evening, a skinny black teen helped an elderly white woman whose car had broken down in the cold. He pushed the heavy vehicle through mud and rain, fixed it with old tools from his late father, and asked for nothing in return. But that act got him kicked out of the only place he had to sleep. What he didn't expect was that the woman quietly returned and repaid his kindness in a way no one could have predicted. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Evening was falling slow, but the rain came suddenly. Cold season rain that soaked through skin and settled in the bones. Water pounded on the old tin roof, slid down cracked gutters, then splashed onto the gravel lot behind Hank's auto shop. The yellow overhead bulb flickered from bad wiring, making the whole yard shudder like it had a fever. Dre was hunched beside a mound of scrap metal. His canvas jacket, once dark, was now a second skin, plastered to his back, soaked through. He'd been at it for hours, scavenging old copper wires, crushed tin cans. Hank's cast-offs may be worth a few meager bucks. Each step he took, his worn-out sneakers squelched, a wet, cold sound, like walking through broken ice. The rain numbed his hands, but he kept moving, stooped low, always listening for any sound from the front of the shop. Nothing but rain. Old Mike, the veteran mechanic who'd been working at Hank since before Dre was born, had left early. Hank had shut the place down at 4, claiming no one fixed cars in the rain, but Dre knew the real reason. Hank had a meeting with a supplier and didn't want him hanging around too long. He had made that clear. "This ain't no shelter. Do your bit and get lost." Still, Dre stayed, because behind a stack of old oil drums and a warped wooden plank was his sleeping corner. The only place to lie down on a night like this. Beside the makeshift pillow sat a rusted toolbox etched with a horseshoe, his most prized possession, left behind by a father who passed away when Dre was in 3rd grade. His mother had left not long after, unable or unwilling to raise a boy with more pain than answers. Since then, Dre had learned to keep going, with no one to catch him when he fell. He was bending down to grab a strip of rebar when a soft sound broke through. The scrape of something heavy shifting. He looked up. Through the thick curtain of rain, something unusual caught his eye. A luxury car, older model but clearly expensive, sat idling about 200 yards away. Its hazard lights blinked frantically, holding on to the last light of day. And at the passenger side, an elderly figure was struggling with the door. Dre dropped the scrap in his hands and headed toward it, each step sending cold water pouring into his shoes. Up close, he saw a white woman, about 70, hair silver and tangled inside her hood. Her lips were pressed tight, but her eyes were wide, unsure. "Ma'am, do you need help?" Dre's voice was hoarse from the cold, but gentle. The woman flinched, surprised, but her eyes only flickered slightly at the sight of Dre. A skinny black teen, young-faced, muddy-handed, but soft-spoken and polite. Evelyn's heart gave a little jump. She had been stranded for what felt like hours, the cold seeping into her bones. Seeing a young man, especially one so unkempt, emerge from the shadows would typically make her wary. Yet, there was something in his quiet, gentle voice that disarmed her. A flicker of hope, so fragile, began to warm her. She hesitated, then said, "The car? It won't start. I got lost, saw the lights on. Thought someone might still be here." Drake gave a quick nod, peered at the dashboard, dim lights, a faint burnt smell hanging in the damp air. "I'll push it into the yard, then I'll take a look. But this car—" She began to protest, likely thinking it was too heavy, but Dre had already circled to the back, planting both hands on the trunk. The tires slid over the rain-slicked pavement. Every push made his spine scream. Wind whipped against him, rain stung his skin. Near the edge of the lot, one wheel dropped into a shallow gutter. Dre hissed through his teeth, threw his shoulder into the side, forcing the car to roll. His whole body trembled as the front tires finally cleared the ledge. He stumbled forward, breathless. "I'm good," he whispered, mostly to himself. Rain clung to his lashes, ran in rivulets down his temples. Dre popped the hood, hands trembling, and wiped the engine block with a dirty rag. He sagged for a moment, panting, then walked back toward the oil drums. From behind them he pulled out the horseshoe toolbox. His fingers lingered on the carved emblem, brushing it like it still held warmth. In those moments of touching this keepsake, Dre felt an invisible thread connecting him to his late father. It wasn't just about mechanics, but a silent promise of responsibility, a legacy he had to uphold. He took a deep breath, as if drawing strength from the past. He sat down, opened the lid, and leaned close to the engine. The air smelled strongly of oil. A dark golden sheen had pooled beneath the car. He slid underneath, close enough to smell the leak, and saw it. The camshaft seal had cracked. The oil bolt was loose. Engine fluid had dripped across the pavement, trailing all the way to the lot's edge. One long fracture. A crack, just a tiny crack, but it could ruin everything. Images of his family's car breaking down, then his mother leaving, flashed through his mind. The fear of failure, the fear of loss, choked him again. But this time he wouldn't let it happen. He would fix this crack as an affirmation that he could control something, even if it was just a car engine. He stayed quiet, then pulled out an old rubber ring and a worn socket wrench. He dried them off with his jacket sleeve and knelt down again, working in silence. Rain kept drumming the roof. Wind slid across his back, but he didn't stop. His face leaned close to the engine, eyes narrowed, focused, like a doctor stitching something still alive. In that moment, Dre was completely absorbed. The sound of the rain, the cold, the hunger, all faded away. There was only him, his toolbox, and the engine that needed healing. He felt a strange connection to this car, as if each turn of the wrench was a step towards mending the invisible wounds within himself. The woman stood behind him, not daring to interrupt. Evelyn watched him, a quiet awe building inside her. He was young, obviously poor, yet his movements were precise, confident. He seemed to know exactly what he was doing. It reminded her of Carter, her son, in his younger days, absorbed in his work, finding solace and purpose in the turning of a wrench. She watched this kid, poor, untrained, yet familiar with every move. And his eyes, they didn't ask for anything, just worked. Dre wiped his hands on a soaked cloth, then double-checked the seal. "All good now, ma'am. You can try starting it." Evelyn slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. A light mist of smoke drifted into the cold air. Dre gave a small nod and shut the hood. "What's your name?" she asked softly. Dre shook his head, avoided her eyes. "It's not important, ma'am. Your car's fine now." Evelyn slowly opened her wallet. The edges of the bills inside were damp. "At least let me pay you. You worked through this storm." He looked at her, not angry, not proud, just shook his head gently, eyes lowered in a quiet kind of apology. A gentle refusal rose within Dre. He didn't want to trade kindness for money. What was truly valuable wasn't the dollars, but the feeling of helping someone truly in need, of seeing the relief on her face. That was a priceless reward. "It's all right. I think you should get home before the cold gets worse," he said softly, as if even he didn't want to hear himself speak. Evelyn stood still for a moment, both hands wrapped around her purse, water dripping from the rim of her hood. A profound sense of something indefinable settled in Evelyn. This boy, soaked and shivering, had offered a pure, unblemished act of kindness without expectation. It was a rarity, a quiet defiance of the harshness of the world she often encountered. She felt a deep, unfamiliar pull to this young stranger. She stared at the boy in front of her, thin, soaked to the bone, cheeks flushed from cold. His hands were stained with oil, but there was something deliberate in the way he wiped his tools, something tender when he closed the hood of her car like it was made of glass. She reached into her wallet, pulled out a folded bill, tried to hand it to him. "Please, let me at least." But Dre shook his head again, barely lifting his eyes. "It's okay, ma'am. Just glad your car's running." There was no pride in his voice, no show of heroism, just quiet certainty, like helping her was the most natural thing he could have done. Evelyn hesitated, then slowly slid the money back. In that pause, something passed between them, unspoken but unmistakable. She saw it, the way he looked at the ground, not out of shame, but hunger, not for food, though maybe that too, but for dignity, for a moment to matter. She stepped closer, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You've got good hands, young man. Your father teach you?" Dre blinked fast, as if the question had come from a long way off. He nodded once, almost too small to see. "Well," she smiled faintly, voice soft like cotton. He'd be proud. Then she turned and climbed into her car. The engine purred under her hands. She glanced in the rearview mirror, just long enough to see the boy step back into the shadows, toolbox in hand, rain curling around him like smoke. The rain had stopped by morning, but the cold had not. Mist hovered low over the gravel lot behind Hank's auto shop, clinging to the oil-streaked pavement like breath held too long. Light crept in slowly through the clouds, pale, tired light that brought no warmth. Hank stood near the edge of the yard, his boots crunching on the wet gravel. A cigarette hung from his lips, smoke curling upward and disappearing into the fog. He usually did not bother with the back lot, but that morning something had caught his eye, a thin trail of dark stains snaking in from the far edge of the fence. "Damn it," Hank muttered. He crouched, swiped 2 fingers across the black patch. Slick. Fresh. Not the kind of spill that came from old junkers, and not from anything on his current roster. He traced the trail with his eyes, catching the faint drag marks in the dirt. Someone had pushed a car in, a car that did not belong there. A flicker of yellow light from the shop's motion sensor blinked on. Hank turned, eyes narrowing. Inside, Dre was folding greasy rags, his hands moving slow and careful. Hank stepped through the doorway, his voice low and flat. "Are you working on cars back here without asking me?" Dre's stomach rumbled. He had not eaten since that half bag of trail mix yesterday. His mouth was dry, his thoughts moved like mud. The car broke down. A lady, older, she needed help. I did not charge her or anything, I just—" "So you used my lot like it is your garage?" Hank stepped closer. Smoke curled toward Dre's face. "You work under my roof, you follow my rules. You really think that is all right?" "No, sir, I just thought—" "Her car was not going to make it." "You thought," Hank snapped. "That is the problem." Dre swallowed hard, his shoulders hunched up, trying to make himself smaller. The horseshoe toolbox sat under the counter, still damp from the night before. "I was going to clean everything up," he said softly. "I did not want to wake anybody." Hank said nothing. He turned, walked toward the back door, took one last look at the Mustang, and then turned again. "You are done?" Dre blinked. "Wait, sir." What? Dre's ears rang. Hank's words struck him like sharp stones, one by one. He felt an abyss opening beneath his feet, pulling him down. It wasn't just losing his job, but losing the only place he had to shelter, losing a last glimmer of stability. "You do not sleep here. You do not fix cars that are not mine. You do not sneak around like you own the place. I told you before, this is not a charity." "I was not—" Dre began, but the words caught in his throat. His chest tightened. The hunger was sharp now. But the pain was not just from that. It was the kind of ache that came when something you cared about was ripped away too fast. "Pack your things," Hank said, "and do not come back." Dre blinked again, then turned without another word. Outside, the night was colder than it had been in days. He knelt beside a stack of oil drums and pulled out his toolbox. The one with the carved horseshoe, he hugged it tight to his chest like it might still protect him from something. Every breath Dre took seemed to freeze in the cold air. Resentment, disappointment, and a sense of powerlessness enveloped him. He had tried to do the right thing, yet he was punished. But deep inside, a small flame still flickered, refusing to die out. The rest of his belongings fit into a plastic bag, not much. A change of socks, a worn-out shirt, a few scraps of paper with drawings of engines. A life that could fit in one hand. He walked, past the quiet gas pumps, past the flickering sign that had not worked properly in years. The wind pushed against his back like a wall. His shoes were soaked through. Again. Each step splashed through puddles. Each breath was thick and heavy. He had no destination, no plan, just the road, the cold, and the echo of that man's voice chasing him down. At the corner, beneath a crooked street lamp, Dre stopped. He turned. Far behind him, the auto shop sat quiet, its roof dripping slow and steady, like it was mourning. Through the mist he could still make out the place where he had pushed that car the night before. He could still hear her voice, the way she had looked at him. Not like a stray, not like a problem to be fixed. Just like a person. And that look stayed with him. He lowered his head and hugged the toolbox tighter. It was heavy, but it was warm against his ribs, like a memory that still mattered. He whispered to no one, "One day, I will have my own shop. I will fix things the right way." That vow echoed in Dre's mind, a promise not only to himself but to his late father. The pain and injustice only strengthened his resolve. He wouldn't let what had happened define him. He would rise, with his own 2 hands. The wind gave no reply. But the light above buzzed once, soft and low, as if it had heard him. And in that silent, aching moment, something deep inside him flickered. A spark that had not gone out. Dre was still curled up under the awning of the bus stop, just 2 blocks from Hank's garage. The night wind cut through his thin, worn jacket, carrying the heavy scent of wet dirt, old grease, and sour trash. His head rested on his knees, arms tightly wrapped around the toolbox etched with a horseshoe, like he was holding on to the last warmth of his father's memory. His body trembled, not just from the cold, but from that hollow, gnawing ache in his chest that had no shape and no cure. Then came footsteps, slow, steady. "Kid." The voice was rough, gravelly. Old Mike. He stood under a flickering street lamp, holding a bent umbrella, face blank as usual, but his eyes had softened. Something in them had already made up their mind. "Come with me." Dre looked up, startled. He didn't speak, didn't move. But old Mike had already turned and started walking, like he knew the boy would follow. Mike's place wasn't far, a sagging tin roof, peeling paint, a backyard full of rusted engine blocks and greasy barrels. He didn't bring Dre inside. Instead, he led him around back and unlocked a shed with a creaky aluminum door. The smell of gasoline and dust clung to the air, but it was dry and it was something. "Just for a couple nights," Mike muttered, eyes on the ground. "My wife's sick. Don't do well with strangers. There's an outlet, some old blankets, you'll get by." Dre nodded, barely. The thank you was there, but stuck somewhere deep behind his ribs. It couldn't make it out. Within Dre an inexplicable warmth surged, like a rare sunbeam piercing through thick clouds. Old Mike didn't say much, but his actions resonated louder than any words. It was an acknowledgement, a compassion he had yearned for so long. Old Mike lit a cigarette. The wind tugged at his coat. The ember glowed. "That night you got tossed," he said, voice low. "I saw your eyes. That wasn't a liar's look. I knew Hank was wrong, but I didn't speak up." Dre turned away, hiding his face. But inside, for the first time in a long time, something shifted. Like maybe someone was on his side. By morning, just as a pale sun broke over the rooftops, a silver sedan pulled up outside the gate. Evelyn stepped out, dressed the same as that night, gray trench coat, hair pulled neatly behind her cap, eyes sharp but kind. She didn't rush. Her gaze drifted over the old yard, then landed on old Mike, stacking cans by the fence. "You work at Hank's?" she asked. He nodded. "2 nights ago, a boy helped me with my car. Wouldn't take a dime. Had a toolbox with a horseshoe on it. Brown skin, short hair, scar on his left hand." Mike narrowed his eyes, then nodded. "Dre. Been sleeping in my shed out back." He didn't ask to see him, just stood quietly, hands clasped tight around her purse. Evelyn's mind raced, piecing together the details. The quiet boy, the horseshoe, Hank's notorious temperament. A sharp pang of anger went through her for Hank's cruelty, but it quickly gave way to a deeper resolve. This boy, discarded, yet possessing such integrity, resonated deeply with her own grief for Carter. She saw a glimmer of his spirit in Dre, a quiet strength she desperately wanted to nurture. Family? No, Ma. She left when he was little. Dad passed 2 years ago. Kid's been drifting since. Why'd he get fired? Mike sighed. Hank thought he was stealing hours. No proof, just suspicion. He told her everything, about the rain, the boy huddled under the streetlight, that look in his eyes. Evelyn listened without interrupting. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a paper bag and a folded note. Please give him this, and tell him I didn't forget. Dre opened the letter that evening, sitting cross-legged on the cold floor of the shed. The paper was thick, edges crisp. Her handwriting was small, neat, but full of care. Dre, I owe you more than I can say. Not for the car, but for what you reminded me that night. That kindness still exists without strings, that strength can come quietly, through grease-stained fingers and a steady gaze. You didn't ask for anything. You gave help freely, but I believe in repaying what's good with good. My son Carter ran a garage before he passed. His shop still runs. Run now by a man he trusted. I've asked him to offer you a place, part-time, with training, and this. He had enclosed a photo of the new Snap-on toolbox. He would have liked you, Dre. I think he might have seen himself in you. That's why I couldn't just drive away. I'll never forget the horseshoe on your box, or the way you said he'd be proud. I think your father already is. Come if you're ready. No pressure, no pity, just a door open. With gratitude. Evan. 2 days later, a weathered Ford pickup pulled up by old Mike's shed. Tom stepped out first, tall and broad-shouldered, wiping grease from his palms. Evelyn followed, hands tucked in her coat, a calm confidence in her walk. Dre stood in the shed doorway, toolbox clutched against his chest. His eyes darted between them, mistrustful, but something else too, wonder. In that moment, Dre felt a current run down his spine. It wasn't just a job offer, but an invitation to a future he had never dared to dream of. The distrust was still there, but it couldn't obscure the burning hope in his chest. He was standing at a crossroads he never thought he'd reach. You remember me? Evelyn asked. Tom popped the tailgate. Inside was a red Snap-on toolbox, gleaming, pristine. This was Carter's, Tom said. We want to offer you part-time work. Training, too. It's not charity. You earned this. Evelyn stepped closer, voice quiet. You gave me more than a fixed car. You gave me back a bit of trust, in people, in decency. That matters. Dre looked down at the 2 boxes, one worn and scraped, one shining new. And he didn't have to choose. He picked up both. Holding both toolboxes, Dre felt as if the burden that had weighed him down for so long had been lifted. The old box was proof of hardship, of resilience. The new box was the promise of a fresh start, of trust. He didn't have to leave the past behind. He could carry it with him as luggage for the future. That afternoon, Dre sat in the back of Tom's truck, holding both toolboxes, one scuffed and old, the other brand new. They drove past the corner store, past Hank's garage, past the low metal roof of old Mike's shed, the place where a quiet old man had opened one final door for a boy with nowhere else to go. And for the first time in a long while, Dre leaned his head against the window, not to sleep, but to dream. 4 months had passed since that rainy night. Dre was now working as an assistant mechanic at Carter's Auto Garage, the place that once belonged to Evelyn's late son. He lived in a small room tucked behind the garage. The walls were cracked, the ceiling low, and the yellow light flickered like the last breath of a long day. But to Dre, it was the first place in years he could call home. Though the room was simple, it was the only place he truly owned, where he could finally breathe a sigh of relief after long days. The feeling of having a home, however small, soothed so much of the pain and insecurity within him. When he first arrived, Dre barely spoke. He stayed in the background when customers came by, watching everything, memorizing each step. His hands were clumsy with the newer tools, but his eyes missed nothing. Some days he got oil in his eyes, other days he nicked his hand while swapping out a rusted filter. But he never complained, never asked for a break. Every time he messed up, he would tighten his grip on the toolbox and whisper to himself, "Next time, I'll do it better." That whispered phrase wasn't just determination, it was a haunting. The fear of failure still lingered, reminding him of the past. He knew that every small mistake could lead to significant consequences, and he had to do better, not just for himself, but for the trust Evelyn and Tom had placed in him. At night, after his shift, Dre would sit alone in his tiny room. The walls were peeling, the outlets loose, and the yellow bulb cast his shadow across the chipped tile floor. Still, he kept working, scraping off old paint, filling in cracks, repainting each corner by hand. Every clean wall felt like a piece of the past smoothed over. Every coat of paint was a small claim to safety. Some nights he would lie there, staring at the patched-up ceiling and whisper, "At least, I have a key now." That small key, in his pocket, was a symbol of the freedom and security he had never possessed. It not only opened the door to his room, but also opened up a sense of belonging, a belief that he no longer had to wander, no longer had to be cast out. One Saturday afternoon, Dre asked Tom, the garage manager, if he could use the back lot on weekends. Tom nodded, so Dre started by washing a few junked cars. Then he nailed a small wooden sign to the fence out front. "Learn basic car repair free." The first day, just 2 kids showed up, one with a busted chain on his bike, the other holding a nearly empty oil can. Dre did not talk much, he just showed them, held their hands, pointed, demonstrated. 1 week passed, then 2. More kids kept coming, one carrying a tire, another dragging an old wrench, and a few with nothing but wide eyes and curiosity. Dre taught them how to change oil, grease bearings, and pull apart spark plugs, all skills he had once picked up watching from a corner in Hank's old shop. No one paid him, but every time a kid shouted, "I fixed it," Dre would just nod and turn away, blinking faster than usual, like dust had gotten in his eye. Watching the children cheer with joy as they fixed something with their own hands, a warm feeling spread through Dre's heart. He saw himself in their curious, eager eyes. This wasn't just about teaching car repair. It was about planting seeds of self-confidence, of the ability to create value for oneself, something he had once yearned for so deeply. One early evening in March, Dre came home with scraps from the garage yard, a few rusty rods, leftover gears, broken fender parts. Under the yellow light next to his horseshoe-carved toolbox, he began crafting piece by piece. By the 3rd night he had made a small car model out of metal. It was rough but full of detail. On the roof he carved one word, Evelyn. He wrapped it in cloth and handed it to Tom. "If you ever get the chance, would you give this to her?" Tom did not ask questions. He just looked at the model for a long time and gave a quiet nod. A week later, in an upstairs room washed in soft sunlight, Evelyn unwrapped the cloth with trembling fingers. As her fingers brushed against the rough metal of the tiny car, Evelyn felt a wave of bittersweet emotion wash over her. It was a tangible echo of Carter, a reminder of his own childhood projects, yet infused with the quiet strength of kindness. This wasn't just a gift. It was a testament to the enduring power of kindness. A circle completed. The little car brought her back to distant evenings, when her son, still small, used to build models from scraps of tin and paint imaginary raceways along their living room floor. She said nothing. She just placed the model on the windowsill, where the late-day light always hit best, like a silent symbol of something that had begun to heal. Evelyn and Dre never saw each other again. And they did not need to. What connected them was never about words. It was in the glance they shared during a storm, in the shape of a worn toolbox, in the weight of a handmade gift passed from hand to hand with no expectation in return. One quiet act of kindness had come full circle, and now it was quietly planting seeds in someone else's heart. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.